A'udhu billahi minash shaitan la'in rajim. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Dearest respected brothers and sisters, viewers from around the world, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Ahlulbayt TV's Muharram special show, Life of Hussain, where we are joined by a number of respectable and learned scholars from within our community to discuss different elements of Imam Hussein's life. Over these shows, brothers and sisters, we have looked at so far the early life of Imam Hussain, his lineage, his early years spent with Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, his relationships with people around him, his family, his father, his mother, his brother, and of course his sister. But not only that, his relationship with his companions, his friends, his trustees, his advisors. We've looked at Imam Hussein's political role, his spiritual role, and of course, briefly in our previous episode, we have looked at the characteristics of Imam Hussain, how we can learn from the messages Imam Hussain teaches us, how Imam Hussain can be seen as a humanitarian figure, an exemplary model for all human beings today, regardless of background, faith, gender, class or identity. And inshallah, in this episode, we will look a bit more at the historical element of Imam Hussain en route to Karbala. Of course, we know the location where Imam Hussain alayhi salam passed away 1400 years ago, and the reason why we are doing these episodes and commemorating his tragic passing. I am joined by the wonderful and the learned Sheikh Ahmed Hanif. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you so much for being here.
It's
a pleasure to be with you once again.
Yes.
Sheikhna, in the last episode, we looked a lot at the characteristics of Imam Hussain. We looked at the so-called comparison, as some people would put it, between Imam al-Hassan and Imam Hussain and their roles politically and religiously. The role of Imam Hussain in Imam Hassan's time, particularly at the time of the peace treaty. So we won't go perhaps into depth on that too much. But moving on from that, when we come to closer to the time of the battle of Karbala, we know, of course, that prior to the battle and prior to the initiation of antagonism that the Caliphate showed, the Ahlulbayt, we know that Walid, who was one of the stewards or representatives of Yazid, came to Imam Hussain alayhi salam, and he said to him, "Give us your allegiance or else you will pay the price." And we know very vividly that Imam Hussain rejected this outright. He said, "Look, I don't want to associate with your regime," and that was essentially the end of it. Some people would say, well, if he said yes, it would have been the end of the story, his life would have been saved. How would perhaps we respond to that, and why did he reject it?
Well, again, I mean, one of the statements he had made to Walid is that a man like me will never give allegiance to a man like Yazid. Eventually, he said that to him. And again, basically, the superior does not subordinate itself to the inferior.
I see.
Okay? All despotic societies need legitimacy. All governments need legitimacy.
Yes.
And one of the important sources for the legitimacy of a government is for it to enlist the acknowledgement and support of prominent members or groups in the society, especially groups that are associated with morality and justice and so forth. You see? So it becomes very important that religious people or people who are forefront in morals for these governments to enlist their point of view. Yes. For example, in the United States of America, we have the Trump administration. This is supported by the Christian right, for example, which gives their legitimacy to this. Yeah. You see, so Yazid goes out and he sends a message. We want these people. Imam Hussain is among them. Ibn Zubair and all of these are among them as people who are considered to be prominent people in the society. Yeah. People who are associated with, let's say, the Prophet or the major companions of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and so forth to be able to give him that. If he does not get that, Yazid is an outsider.
Yeah.
You know, and so again, for us in our society, we need to be able to be aware of that.
Yes.
There will be forces that will come to, for example, co-opt the Shia community or the Muslim community in general, you know, to support their own particular agenda. And this is what we have to be afraid of, and this is what Imam Hussain is rejecting.
Absolutely. Sheikh, just very quickly, I mean, we know, of course, that Imam Hussain was in the holy city of Medina. He of course, from the city of Medina, he was advised to stay in Medina, but we know he left, of course. Why did he choose to do this?
The main reason why Imam Hussain alayhi salam left Medina were the three reasons, you know, that I could think of off the top of my head. One is that he was a marked man now in Medina.
Okay.
You know. And so to leave Medina, he's moving from a situation of insecurity to one of mobility.
I see.
You see, insecurity where he could be controlled in one spot to mobility where he's now, yes, exactly.
Right.
Yeah. And he needs to get his message out. Right. And this is why he's going to Mecca. But that's, you know, he's going to Mecca because at the time of the Hajj and so on, which will be coming, you know, he'd be able to propagate his message. Okay. The other one was that, according to Tabari, you know, he was advised by Muhammad ibn Hanafiya to go to Mecca instead of Medina, yeah, because Mecca could be a place where he could propagate his message. Right. And the third one is that he had a dream from the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you know, which advised him to go to Mecca and keep going because he will be getting martyred, and this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants. And I think, you know, I think we could combine all of them. You know, I think we could say all three levels are such that they can feed into each other. You know, one in terms of the practical aspect, the other one in terms of the revelatory aspect, you know, or the esoteric aspect. You know, that if you are in contact with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you know, Allah would guide you as to what to do.
I see.
You know, and that guidance for you to do what you're going to do, in retrospect, it mightn't seem as, how should I say, positive from where you are. As Allah says, you go there and, you know, keep on going, you're going to die. Yeah. I want you to die. You see? You know, but in terms of, let's say, when we look back and we see the outcome, we say, whoa, it's a great strategy.
Absolutely, yeah. But Sheikh, when he went, of course, he went to Makkah and he took his children, his family as well with him. Why did he choose to do that? Because you mentioned that he was a marked man.
Yes.
Now, does not put his family in danger as well?
Yes, it does. But again, this is what Allah wants, but that sounds kind of cliche.
Yeah.
Now, let's look at it from a pragmatic point of view. In Mecca, you know, Imam Hussain alayhi salam is quoted to have said, I cannot find even 20 people in Mecca who would support my cause. So Imam Hussain alayhi salam has no choice but to go with those companions that support him, a very small number of people, and with his family. Why his family? Because according to Islamic law, one of the doctrines of war is that you do not attack or bother non-combatants. Yes. And especially if those non-combatants are the family of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You know, so their atrocities to the non-combatant members of the holy household is something that would morally condemn the Yazidi regime. The other thing is this: Imam Hussain is taking along with him his media outlet.
Okay.
It turns out that it is the family of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, spearheaded by Hazrat Zainab salamullah alaiha, that would propagate what went on in Karbala, and that would lead that media, right? That news would lead to a revolution in the consciousness of the people.
Subhanallah.
Yeah? In other words, what it is telling us then is that without media, without the information as to what you have done, why you are doing it, why you are suffering because you are doing it, without that being communicated to people on the outside, you will not find people who would be supportive of you or to be able to take your struggle forward and continue it. So this is why I think it becomes also strategically important for him to take his family along with him.
Do you think, Sheikh, that the decision for Imam Hussain to leave to go to Mecca was a decision which was calculated while he was in Medina, prior to knowing, of course, that he was a, as we've mentioned, marked man? Or was it something which he was spontaneously, I don't want to say pushed into doing, but he was made to have to do it, having seen kind of the opposition, the antagonism in the city of Medina?
Well, I think it depends on the reports that we're looking at.
Right.
Okay. On one level, there's as I mentioned before, there's a pragmatic aspect to it.
Yes.
You know, you're going to Mecca, you know, where you have now a wider audience, you know, and
House
people
of
become,
God.
and people coming from all over to meet you.
Yes, of course.
You see?
More
And
global.
the regime was aware of that. You know, the regime was aware that Imam Hussain alayhi salam was actually doing his part in spreading the news. You know, and he became concerned about them wanting to take his life in Mecca, you know, assassinate him in Mecca, which would defile the holy land, because you're not supposed to spill blood in Mecca. And so he moves off to Karbala. So on that level, one can say it is calculated. And of course, you know, we know our imams would not be making spur of the moment types of decisions unless these decisions are guided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and divinely guided.
Sheikh, we know, of course, excuse me, that there's a number of sermons, speeches, words of wisdom that the Holy Imam alayhi salam gives, as of course while he's in Medina, as he departs to Mecca, and then even en route to Karbala. What sort of sermons are these, firstly, and how can we take any lessons away from these?
Well, the number of sermons are apparently are very small in number, you know, and one of them, for example, is the sermon on Arafah, you know, which is very, very spiritual, very irfani, you know, that calls upon people to be conscious, God conscious, to be socially conscious, you know, and to stand up for right and truth and so forth.
Yes.
And then you have other speeches, you know, where he talks about things like, for example, one of the very important statements in one of his speeches was that if you see the people who rule you, your government or so on, calling you towards doing wrong, you know, and standing up for wrong, it is your responsibility to stand up against it.
But saying that, Sheikh, something's come to my mind. When he was saying these words to the wider public, was it falling on deaf ears? Were people refusing to listen? Or was it a case where people were willing and wanted to be a part of this revolution, wanted to support the family of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, but couldn't because they didn't want to risk their lives?
I think it's a combination of a number of things.
Okay.
You know, because I think for example, when we speak to people, all right, let's say we speak, I've had this experience where I would speak to somebody about, let's say, a non-Muslim about Islam. You know, a lot of people need to digest that.
Yeah.
You know, the message that you're giving, a lot of people need to digest it. You know, we should not be anxious for them to be converted or to come to your point of view right there and then. Yeah. You know, for that to happen, they would have had to have some kind of background up in this, whether in their nature or whether they heard something from somewhere before, you know, for them to respond so immediately. But, you know, I have seen that, for example, I might talk to somebody about Islam today, okay? They didn't become a Muslim now, but 5 years down the road, I heard, so became a Muslim.
Yeah.
You see? So you have people who would be listening and who would be digesting this, but it takes a while. You know, then you have people who might be listening who might want to make an immediate step, but there might be things in the way that would prevent them from making that immediate step.
So when that accusation comes of those who didn't support Imam Hussain are responsible for the death of Imam Hussain, is that a fair point to make? Or is it kind of a mixed bag of, yes, some people actively refused and didn't want to be a part of it, others wanted to but couldn't?
Yeah, all those who are um, who do not take a stand, in a sense, they are. Um, and I think that's just the reality of things. You see, if you're in a situation and something wrong is taking place in your name, as a British person or as a Shia Muslim or whatever, and this atrocity is taking place in your name,
Yeah.
with apparently your backing because you voted for X party or whatever,
Yeah.
And you do not acknowledge that and try to change that,
Yeah.
then you're responsible for it. Changing it in this society might, as I mentioned before, might not require violence,
Yeah.
okay, but it might require education of people, and persistence in maintaining a particular point of view and pushing towards a particular action until things change.
Finally, just before we kind of wrap up, Sheikh, the the tactics or the strategies you mentioned of Imam Hussain to move away from danger, to stick close with his family, what does that represent to us today? How can we learn from his movements, his ideas, his strategies?
Well, I think when you said this, it reminds me of the concept of hijra.
Okay.
All right? What is hijra? Okay. Hijra is either an internal or an external migration. To increase your efficacy of action by distancing yourself from too much pressure of the system you would like to change.
Right.
And so you'd find that, for example, in the story of a lot of revolutionary movements, you have what we call strategic retreats, because revolutionary movements start as minority types of movements, and then they grow. And what you find in some of revolutionary movements is that you need a strategic retreat. For example, in China, you had what we call the Long March, which is a whole long march of retreat from the Japanese invaders at the time, in order to counteract. You see? You find, for example, in Cuba, the same thing. You had people up in the hills, and they were biding there. They removed themselves from the society. They were biding their time when they came back. The Hijra to Medina, what did that do? It was moving to a freer environment where you can develop your Islamic state, or your Islamic, what's a bad word in these days, Islamic state, your Islamic environment, to be able to conquer Mecca.
Yes.
All right. Yes. I say inward or outward. Outward could be, for example, Muslims establishing distinct geographical places where they can live an Islamic life.
Right.
Smack dab in the middle of Western society.
Yeah.
Like, for example, Orthodox Jews have their own neighborhoods and so forth. It could be an internal hijra, for example, where you distance yourself from negative types of behaviors and thoughts in your society, and try to develop your own thought, your own Islamically based thought, and how you could criticize these types of pseudo systems and so forth, to be able to be more effective. So I think Imam Hussain alayhi salam is teaching us this. You cannot be part of be in a system that is oppressive or unjust or wrong and not try to change it. And to try to change it, first of all, you have to move away from it.
I see.
And you could do that either physically or psychologically.
I see.
Yeah? But with the physical, the psychological is also more important. So if you move physically and you don't change your mind or your mindset, it doesn't make any
Your mentality
change.
Has to develop
Exactly.
Transition. Absolutely.
Exactly.
I think we've covered quite a lot, Sheikh. So thank you so much for joining us, for blessing us with your expertise and your knowledge. Brothers and sisters, I'm sure you'll agree with me that through Sheikh Ahmed Hanif's guidance and knowledge, we have covered a lot of topics in this episode. We have looked at the reason for Imam al-Hussain and, of course, his family rejecting the word of Walid, who was the representative of the Caliph Yazid, to refuse the legitimization of the caliphate at that time. We've looked at the migration, as we've discussed, from Medina to Mecca, the reason why Imam al-Hussain and his family, alayhimus salam, decided to move to the city of Mecca. And of course, brothers and sisters, we've looked very briefly at some of the lessons we can learn as people, as human beings, not just as Muslims, but here in the 21st century, how we can learn from the story and the history behind Imam Hussain alayhi salam's life. Brothers and sisters, join us for our next episode, inshallah, where we will be discussing more stories from the life of Imam Hussain, but particularly understanding how we today and this Muharram can learn from Imam's message and inshallah work to build a better, more moral society. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
يا حسين